I'm Ryan from the House of Homestead. Today I'm going to show you how to make a cloche for your garden bed. We have a couple here that we have from previous seasons that were built to fit some garden beds that we had at a previous property. They are a little bit rough, so we're going to give them a quick once over, recover the two of them, and I'm going to show you how we put the smaller one together because it actually needs the framework to be repaired as well. If you don't know what a garden cloche is, it's essentially a mobile greenhouse so that you can set it down over top of your garden bed or your row or wherever you're planting your winter crops, and it will create its own little ecosystem inside so that it stays warm enough during the frost season and going into the much colder months and extends your growing season for a longer period of time. So we're going to take this smaller one to our workshop area over here. We're going to tear it apart and show you how it all goes together. Okay, so here we are. We've got our cloche sitting here ready to be torn back down and put back together. This one served us well for a couple of years. The downside to this one was a bit of a design flaw on my part. When I put the hoops onto this, I decided to drive a screw through the center into a little ridge piece to support it so that those hoops wouldn't move around, and it weakened it in the center, so they bent and they broke and it tore through the plastic, and we kind of lived with it like that for a year or two, but now we're ready to fix it. So I'm going to tear this sucker apart, get it down to the bare frame, and show you sort of the basics of how it's put together, and then I'm going to reassemble it all. Okay, so here's our basic frame. The way that I built this one, it's just out of 2x4 pressure treated lumber. Happened to be what we had available at the time. Depending on how long you want it to last, it's not necessary per se to use pressure treated lumber, but because we have used pressure treated lumber with this and it's been sitting in the dirt, as you can see, the back side of it, it used to be actually mounted to a garden bed. That's why there's some hinges on it. But the pressure treated lumber has made it so that this can sit in the dirt year after year and is not rotting. It's still got some good structural rigidity to it. The way that this is put together is just with some very basic building techniques. So you're just cutting pieces to the sizes that you want, screwing them together, and then adding a little bit of cross bracing in the middle, or in the corners. That little bit of cross bracing just stops it from wanting to give laterally like this so it stays square. These are really simple. They're just small pieces of 2x4, usually scrap pieces is what I use. Cut on opposing 45 degree angles on either side, and then screwed into the corner of the frame once the frame is screwed together. So very simple. If you've got some basic building techniques down, you're going to be able to handle this really easily. The way that we actually mounted the hoops for our dome is by actually just resting them inside a hole that is just slightly larger than the diameter of the tubing that we're using. So this, I believe, I cut with a 1-inch spade bit in my drill. So really easy, just drill the hole about 1 inch deep, and we'll rest the poles inside there. So I'm going to go ahead and cut some new pieces of tubing and start bending them into place, and then we'll continue from there. I've got 10-foot pieces of tubing here. I'm pretty sure that I cut these at 5 feet. It looks like that's basically exactly half, so I'm going to cut them down to 5 feet each, which will have this hoop house standing just a hair over 2 feet tall once it's assembled. So I'm going to cut those pieces and bend them into place. so I have all my pieces cut and ready to go. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to bend them into place. When you're bending them, you're going to start on one end, get it planted into the frame, and then as you bend it, you're going to sort of help it along so that it doesn't want to kink or fall over on you while you're doing it. So, you know, a little bit of technique. The first one usually is a bit of a pain, and then once you get that, you figure out exactly what the easiest way is to bend it into place. So I'm going to go ahead and get all of my hoops in place now. So one of the keys is to bend really slow. It's going to speed up on the camera as I do each of these in the video, but you really want to take your time as you bend them. If you just try and force them into place really quickly, there's a very good chance that one will break in the middle, and you know, when piping like this does break, it tends to break and splinter at the same time, which is obviously dangerous for you. So take your time. It shouldn't break as long as you're not in freezing temperatures. And you know, if you don't try and force it, they'll usually fit really nicely, and you'll get a really good shape out of it. Okay, so I've got my 5 hoops in place. This kind of creates the overall dome structure of it. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a new ridge piece. So this piece is going to be fastened on from the underside. Last time I used screws, and those screws weakened the center of this, which caused it to kink and then eventually break and tear through the plastic. So I'm not going to do that again. What I'm going to do instead is use some just general baling wire that I've got laying around to essentially just tie these to this little ridge piece so that the shape has some rigidity. So when I stretch plastic over it, those hoops don't want to collapse into the center. Okay, now so for our ridge piece, for us to fasten our wire through, I'm just going to drill a hole in the general vicinity of where each hoop is so that I've got something to actually feed into this to hold it in place, and then I'll just twist it over top of the tubing to make sure that it holds them where I want them. Okay, so the first time we put these together, all we did was we cut an extra long piece of this plastic sheeting, which is used for vapor barrier in houses. You know, anything that will allow light through and sort of hold in moisture and heat will do the trick. So you can use greenhouse plastic, you can use any number of things as long as the sun gets through, and it, you know, is not heavily ventilated. These cloches were originally made in a bit of a panic. So because I get to take a little bit of time with it, I'm going to try it a different way. I'm going to cut a separate piece for each end and tape it in place, and then I'm going to do a single piece wrapped over the top so that it's neater and I don't have to worry about a big bunch of plastic on either end. So the easiest way to do this is to essentially cut strips, you know, half an inch inside the inside edge of this tubing. Do strips that are, you know, 3 to 5 inches wide so that you've got some flexibility with the shape. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut these tabs all down to a shorter length so that they're easier to tape all together. I'm going to get this side taped up so that I'm comfortable with how it looks, and then I'm going to stretch it over on the other side to finish it up. Okay, so this is tuck tape. Tuck tape is a type of tape that is used in the building industry. It's used for sealing up overlapped seams in vapor barrier behind drywall, which is what this plastic is originally intended for. It's also used for things like house wrap before you put up siding, and a couple other things where you need a good seal and some weather resistance. It's red, which isn't the nicest look necessarily, but beggars can't be choosers, and we really do try and work with what we have on hand rather than going out and trying to buy something specific, very specific to each individual task that we're trying to do. So I'm going to use this because it will hold up well season after season. Okay, so that looks pretty good. It seems to be holding nicely, which is great. The sides of it are much tighter than they used to be. The way it used to be, it was folded over, and water and leaves and bugs and whatever would build up inside it. So this is going to be much nicer, just from the standpoint of it being a cleaner side and holding up better over the seasons as we move it around. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and do the exact same thing with the other side. Okay, so we have our 5 hoops in place. They are kind of bridged together with this ridge piece here that's stopping them from sliding side to side. We now have our sides covered. That plastic is pulled nice and tight, and it's taped on there with tuck tape. The last thing that we're going to do to finish this off is we're going to cut a piece of this plastic to just the right size so that we can stretch it over top with just a slight overhang, maybe a couple inches on either side, to tape this top edge to make sure that it's all tight together. But we're going to take that one big piece that will cover the whole top, stretch it over top, staple it, tape and clean up this edge so that it looks as best we can possibly make it look, and we'll be all done. This part, because of the size of it, this is 8 feet long, makes it a rather large piece of plastic that's going to be hard to manage individually, so having a buddy handy, I'm lucky enough that I've got Anna, who you all know, who's going to give me a hand with this. So I'm going to go get her. Okay, so we have covered both our sides. Now we're going to cut a piece of plastic to just a little bit wider than the whole width of it, and then I can stretch that over and we're done. So I need you to help me cut this piece. So if you can hold that end, and I will hold this end.
Is it folded?
Yes. Question is,
That's
is it
not
going to wrap
it.
all the way around?
Oh, not quite.
No. We are just short.
Okay, cut. So this happens often, that we run out of something and he's got to make a run to the hardware store. So if I can offer you a handyman tip, it would be to make sure that before you start any project that you have all of the materials that you need on hand. I nag at him a lot about this, and that's probably why he doesn't listen to me, quite honestly, but I always tell him to make sure that before you start, the day before, whatever, go out and get anything that you're going to need, so you don't need to stop work in the middle and go run to the hardware store. I liken it to cooking or baking, right? Take a look at your ingredients list, make sure that you have everything on hand first, so that you're not halfway through a cake and you don't have eggs, because been there, right? So anyway, that's my little handyman tip. We're working on it, but I love him anyway. All right.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Are you ready?
I am ready.
I'm totally ready.
Are you ready?
I'm so ready to be done with this.
Okay. So, what you need to do is put that guy right here. Put that in. top. Let it overhang by like 2 inches on your side.
Like on this side over
here?
Yeah.
Only a couple inches though, no
Okay.
more than that. Hold it tight there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So why doesn't this look any longer? We haven't unfolded it,
We
right?
need to unfold it.
Okay.
This side. Okay. Good from here.
That's it.
That's it. That's all I needed from you.
3 hours later. Just come out quickly, he said. We're almost done, he said.
Yes, well.
It'll just take a couple minutes, he said.
Thank you.
I love you.
Okay.
Okay, bye now.
Okay, bye. Okay, so with the first side stapled, I'm just going to tip it onto its side, and it'll make it much easier for me to stretch it and staple it. That roof should handle it. I'm going to try and be nice to it and not lean on it or anything. Okay, so with that stretched over the way that it is, I can now just cut it along the bottom edge to remove the rest of the excess there. And then I'm just going to clean the sides up and tape it to seal it off. Once you've trimmed that off, it's a good idea to just go and add a few more staples into the bottom and make sure that it's all tight and not going to pull and rip out on you. The next thing that we are going to do here is just pull this guy tight and run a nice solid bead of tape along this edge to hold the main piece over the ends that we did earlier. This should give it a really nice seal. It should handle the weather well. This looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and do the exact same thing on the other side, and that gives us pretty much our finished product as it looks right now. Okay, so there we go.
Throw it on. And this, so the skinnier one seems to fit this bed just perfectly. How are you doing on that side?
Good.
I'm like right over top of the beets here. I just have to get the squash plant out of the way. There we go. Ah, so that'll fit over. So what were the dimensions here?
So this particular one is 2 feet wide and 8 feet long.
Right, yeah, and that fits really nicely over your kind of standard market row. And then, of course, we had originally made them to fit our raised beds. So if you have raised beds, you can use these on the raised beds as well.
They work great. When you do use them on raised beds, what we did is we put old door hinges on it and screwed them into the bed. So all you had to do was just swing it up, and one person could do it very easily. When it's like this, you're probably going to need a second pair of hands to lift it off.
Move that back. There you go, a DIY garden bed cloche to extend your growing season this fall and winter. So if you like this video, hit like below and subscribe for more updates from the house and homestead. Bye for now.
See ya.